talking about storytelling, and actually I blame you, Peter. This is your fault. You are the person who got us to this sofa telling stories, because you started me telling stories and you started storytelling in Cambridge.
That's not entirely true, Marion, because you had been telling stories, I know, to reception-age children for many years. What I helped you do, I'm proud to say, was to go public and to tell to adults, which you now do with great success. But still, starting the Cambridge Storytellers after I retired in 1996 was something I never expected to do, and led me into many interesting side ways and meeting interesting people. It's so inclusive of different countries and cultures, different ages. You don't have to have any money to be interested in storytelling and good at it. All these things I've really enjoyed.
And oral storytelling, people quite often don't quite understand how different it is from the written word.
No.
You can't say things the way you'd write them, and you can't write them the way you say them. It's a very different beast.
That's right. And the voice can do so many things that every time you and I tell a story, we're using our voice in a way that perhaps we haven't done before.
Yes, a story's different every time you tell it, isn't it?
Yes, you never know exactly what words are going to come out or what they're going to sound like. Yeah. So there's that element of risk and excitement about it. And the audience feels this. They know that this is being recreated specially for them on this unique occasion.
And if it's children, they'll be giving you suggestions and shouting out, being very vocal. But even if it's a very well-behaved English, quiet adult audience, they're still giving you, you're sensing, oh, they're enjoying this. We'll just dwell on this moment a bit longer. Or this bit, they don't quite get that. Let's speed over that and let's do something else instead.
Of course, laughter is the most obvious thing and easy to deal with and very rewarding. And you may, in fact, be having quite a profound, moving effect on people and not know about that. Or maybe they'll tell you when they meet you months or years later, that story changed my life. I've had that happen. I expect you have.
I think that's what's so special about stories, that you tell a story and it means a different thing to each person. Loads of exciting stories, but the story I want to tell you now is a story that, to me, it's a story about storytelling. And it happens in a place like this, where there were lots of leftover things lying around. There was once a great palace, huge palace full of marble and glass and silver and gold and tapestries. And as great palaces do, it crumbled into nothing. And a ploughed field was all that could be seen of where that palace once stood. And the people that lived in that country, they didn't even know that once there had been a palace and a huge civilization with things that they'd never dreamed of. One day, a young man was ploughing that field with a little hand plough. That was all he had. When suddenly he saw something shining on the ground. It was a piece of a mirror. Now that young man, he had never seen a mirror before. He had no idea such a thing existed. But when he looked at it, he said, "Why, that's a picture of my father when he was a young man. And he's smiling." And he kept that piece of mirror. He put it in the little pouch at his belt. And as he worked, every so often he'd take it out and look at it and smile. And when he came home at the end of the day, just as he got to the door of his house, he looked at that beautiful picture one last time. And then he went in and he hung up his coat and his pouch and he went off to wash behind the house. But his wife had been looking out of the window, and she'd seen what he'd done, and she was curious. And she took one look, and she went rushing into the kitchen where her mother-in-law, the old woman, was sitting by the fire stirring the stew, and she said, "Look," she said, "look what your son is doing. He's got a picture of a beautiful woman in his bag. She's gorgeous with long hair and eyes like deep pools and scarlet lips." And he keeps looking at this picture and smiling. And the old woman said, "Give it over here." And she had a look. And she saw wisps of grey hair and wrinkles and a mouth with a few teeth missing. "I don't think you've got anything to worry about," she said, and she threw it in the fire. Thanks.
But yes, I got interested in Africa, in storytelling and what role it plays in the lives of different communities. But it was going to a 2-week symposium in Sussex where I really caught the bug, and I just met people I wanted to be with. I thought they were making their fun. They didn't need to have any money. They didn't need to have anything. They could just make their own entertainment and entertain other people and have a great time. And since then, you and I have both travelled around the country to storytelling festivals and made some very good friends and had a lot of fun through it.
And that is a great thing about it, that it's so simple. You just need a kitchen table and a couple of people. That's all you need to tell stories.
So, as well as our story rounds, of course, we've invited many storytellers from other places, other cultures, other countries to come to Cambridge.
So when you started the club, you had a room in a pub,
Yes.
and lots of people turned up, which I'm still envious of. How had people heard about storytelling? Because nowadays still people say, "Storytelling, what's that?"
Yeah.
How did you get this interest in
Well, it's
storytelling?
quite amazing. That first time we got about 40 people just by emailing and sending out little leaflets and things. And then those people said, "Look, we want to do this. We're not going to just listen to you all the time. We want to participate." And so we were away. Over the years, have we had 100 visiting storytellers? Amazing people.
Yeah. You did it for 10 years?
Yes. So you took over from me, to my great relief, because I don't want to be organising anything these days.
Organising's very boring, isn't it? We have
Thank
to
goodness we have people like you who are prepared to do it.
You have to really enjoy storytelling to do all this organising.
Oh, I used to enjoy it, but I'm getting too old now.
Bits of it I love. I don't do it as slickly as you, but I love it. I love getting storytellers in
And these people came to stay,
Yes.
and we've both put people up, and so it's the conversations at breakfast the following day have been fantastic. Some amazing people we've had.
So after I took over from you, and we'd done this wonderful festival, we put so much energy into the festival that actually we didn't build up the club, and we got very low on numbers. But it's really changing, and we've got some brilliant storytellers involved at the moment.
Good,
And we have, every month, we have in CB2 Cafe, we take over the big round table, and we just have a story round the table, and anyone can come along and share a story, and it's very informal and friendly.
In that nice upstairs room.
Yes, it's a bit like sitting in someone's kitchen, really. And it's very safe, and it means anyone can come and try out a story, and you can take a few risks, and people are very accepting and welcoming. So it's a really good training.
So sort of facing each other round a table is a quite different spatial relationship from standing up on a stage and addressing them.
Exactly, yes.
And perhaps a a very old and venerable way of telling stories too.
Yes, it's got that feel to it.
Yeah.
Yes. And then we have the invited tellers, and we've had such good tellers.
Yeah. And new people emerging all the time.
Yes.
But let me show you my... this
good.
is when I bring out this bag, there's a sort of gasp of anticipation with the children. What's going to come out of it
I'm
this time?
excited already.
Yeah. So here's Little Red Riding Hood. But what's special about it is that there is the wolf. I should really have shown you the granny first. And so if they complain that his eyes aren't big enough, this I bring out here, this one.
Granny's telling him off. Yeah. You stay away from me. So for me, telling to adults is the icing on the cake, but most of my life has been telling stories with children, and I used it in teaching a lot. And I think props is what makes the difference. And a lot of people say, oh, but children, they don't need props, they have good imaginations, they can make the pictures. But I think if you've got props, then when the story's over, the children can take the props and make their own stories. I think that's why they're so liberating for children.
Yeah.
Because if they haven't got so much life experience, it's hard for them to name something and conjure it up in the way another child can understand. Yeah. Whereas if they've got a cat or a mouse or something, or a wolf or a duck there, then they can take it off and do a story about a duck, and they've got common ground with the other children. Everyone knows what they're talking about.
This is one little act I do with them. I say, poor ducky is not feeling very well. She says she's got a tummy ache this morning. Quack, 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 quack. You see, she's complaining. And I say to her, Ducky, what's the matter? Quack, quack. Oh, she says she thinks she wants to lay an egg. I say, quack, 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 quack. Oh, she says, children, that you've got to help her. So, children, can you say, push, Ducky, push, Ducky?
It's like being in a labour ward.
Well, the last week I had a small child say, it's just like doing a poo. And it, push, Ducky, push, Ducky, push. Oh, look, a golden, oh, you clever duck, you laid a golden egg. So then I go into the goose that lays the golden egg.
Yes, and you don't need the puppet at that stage, but you needed it before to set the scene and right. Get the character fixed in their mind.
So to some extent they're separate activities with the children, but I link them, the puppetry and the storytelling. Yes, I don't want to have puppets in my hand because in a way they're a bit of an interference with this relationship between me and the audience.
I have a mat that a friend made for me, a story mat, and I arranged the props on it because that's the kind of play that very young children naturally do, small world play, picking up creatures. And so I do a lot of my teaching with stories, and in fact I put some of the stories, I've just done a book, my new book came out, and it's teaching maths through stories, and it's all traditional tales, but they've all got lots of props and lots of stuff that the children can handle and use. So there's one about stepping stones, and there's stones to rearrange and count and sort. And there's one about dinosaurs, and you're arranging dinosaurs in different places and putting them together and combining them. And so all the maths you can do has got objects you can use, but it's also got a story in its heart, because I think maths needs an emotional connection. I think people think of maths as very dry, but actually it's about relationships. It's about, if there's 5 children and 4 cakes, that's a very emotional situation, and that's also maths. So I'm finding the emotion in the maths and using story for that. But you've got a book out as well, haven't you?
I have a book of songs for children. which I got involved with quite unexpectedly because I didn't have any of the ideas for the songs. They've all been translated from Dutch, and the Dutch composer of the music and the words in Dutch is very well known in Holland, and almost by chance I got involved in translating them. I don't know a word of Dutch. I didn't when I started, and I still don't. But we have a third person involved.
Who's a storyteller.
Who's a storyteller.
Yeah.
That's why I know her. And she is fluent in both languages. And so she does a rough literal translation, and then I fit them to the words to the music. And I haven't yet really used those in my storytelling, but it's been a source of great interest.
Yeah.
So in oral storytelling, obviously the way it's told and the relationship with that particular audience are all important. But then the story also has to be amusing or moving or surprising or scary. My story is about a spider. Well, he's a spider man, Anansi, a man and a spider. And he was born in Africa, but he now lives in Brazil and the Caribbean and North America and Manchester and London and Cambridge and all sorts of exotic places. And this is one of the many Anansi stories. And Anansi is a trickster, but he's also very greedy and dishonest, and generally his tricks are to try to get him out of the predicaments, the trouble he gets himself into, but mostly he gets his comeuppance. Very satisfying. Well, Anansi heard news that his mother-in-law had died. And in Africa, a funeral is an occasion for a great feast. So all the animals were really excited about this. They had to run to a village a few miles away, but the pangolin and the warthog and the pygmy hippopotamus and the green monkey and the secretary bird, they all got very excited about the feast they were going to enjoy. Come on, Anansi, they said, there'll be lots of nosh there. Oh no, said Anansi, I cannot eat in such a sorrowful occasion as this. My mother-in-law, he's a lying swine. No, he never had a good relationship with his mother-in-law. He'd been really rude and unfair to her. But he made a great show of, no, I cannot possibly eat. It's all very well for you animals, you uncaring, unfeeling creatures, but I cannot eat. No. But I'll come to the funeral. And so they all went to the village just over the hill. And there were trestle tables laid out with great piles of fufu and pounded yam and rice and stew and bananas and wonderful. And there was a cooking hut over to one side, and one delicious smells of more stew being cooked in there. Anyway, the animals piled in, whereas Anansi kept saying, no, I cannot let a mouthful pass my lips. And, come on, Anansi, come on, we know you love this sort of grub. No. And that when they were so full, they decided that they would need to take some exercise. They'd have a game of football. The football field was just over the ridge, and they all ran off there. And the trouble was they couldn't really agree on the rules because all the four-legged animals thought they were playing soccer, and those that could run on their hind legs thought they would pick up the ball and play rugby. But and the snake was the referee. But and while they were all gone, and Anansi was left in the village near all this food, he thought to himself, I better just go into the cooking hut and make sure that it's okay. So he went in there, and there was a big cauldron standing on stones with a fire underneath. And the most wonderful aroma coming from this, from the hot, boiling hot stew. I'd better just taste it to see if they put enough salt in, he thought. There was a ladle hanging into the cauldron, its hook over the edge. Took the ladle and scooped up a big scoopful and looked around for a bowl and couldn't see any. And he decided that he would use his hat. So he took that off and poured the stew into his hat, put the ladle back. Just at that moment, all the creatures, can you remember what they were? Pangolin, warthog, pygmy hippopotamus, and the green monkey, and the snake, and secretary bird, don't forget the secretary bird. And they all came racing back in, wanting to eat more, and they came straight into the hut, and just as they were coming in, and Nancy didn't want to be caught having eating the stew when he said he wouldn't, he just had time to put the hat on his head, full of the boiling hot stew. And then Nancy, they said, "Oh, we caught you, haven't you? You're just having a oh no," said Nancy, "not a morsel has passed my lips. I wouldn't eat on a day like this." And at that moment, of course, the heat, the boiling, scalding heat began to get through into his head. And he started shaking his head like this. And the animal said to him, "Nancy, why are you shaking your head?" And Anansi said, "Because it's the head-shaking festival back in my village and I've got to go." And then the pain got even worse. So he was twisting his hat and shaking his head. And the animal said, "Anansi, why are you twisting your hat and shaking your head?" And Anansi said, "Because it's the head-shaking, hat-twisting festival back in my village and I've got to go." And the pain got even worse. And he was jumping up and down and shaking his head and twisting his hat. And the animal said to him, "Why are you jumping up and down and twisting your hat and shaking your head?" And he said, "Because it's the jumping up and down, head-shaking, hat-twisting festival back in my village and I've got..." And he couldn't bear it anymore. He ripped the hat off his head and all the stew came running down his face. Of course, the animals fell about laughing. And Anansi ran out into the long grass. And if you poke around in the long grass, you might find him in there, and you'll find that his head is completely bald, because, and you'll know why he's bald-headed. And Nancy, I should tell you, has his own website. And that's very appropriate for a spider. And if you want more Anansi stories, look at his website. But just playing around with your own memory is fun and is fascinating. And I've done quite a lot of teaching of people to storytell, people who've thought they couldn't do it or have never done it before.
Well, that's how I started, coming to one of your courses. I still remember it, down in the basement at CB2.
And I've always found that if people want to learn to tell a story, they can do it. Whether they will then have the courage or audacity to stand up on a public stage and do it is another step.
Or the interest. I mean, there's lots of different ways of telling stories. There's two people sitting in a room together or at a bus stop, or there's a group in a pub, all the way to a big stage.
And everybody can learn to do it.
Yes.
Many people think they can't, but they're wrong.
I had a big argument with one of the Cambridge Storytellers. I said, "Everyone's got a story." And he said, "No, not my friend Paul. My friend Paul has no stories." I couldn't shift him. No. But I still think that everybody's got a story and everyone wants a voice to tell it with.
Yeah.